Peas on Moss is brought to you by Kimberly Schaub, a culinary scientist turned business developer. Over the past 4 years, the audience has downloaded episodes over 40,000 times, and we have 1,500 impressions across the website and a host of social media platforms. Will you consider contributing to the show to help keep it on air? Donations through Patreon help to offset the costs of web hosting, editing, and producing the various Peas on Moss offerings, from podcast episodes to videos, and every little bit helps. From corporate advertisement to sponsored content and private contributions. Reach out to me on peasonmoss.com for details. Welcome to a new episode of the Peas on Moss podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly Schaub, a former research chef, product developer working in business development. This podcast is all about the food industry for folks in the industry, and we're bringing you deep dives about food technology in smaller bites. This week's episode features Jaime Underwood, a food scientist, consultant, and owner of Edible Chemistry. Edible Chemistry Consulting was founded from a desire to help companies, both large and small, develop scientific processes to solve the unique problems that arise during development, scale-up, and commercialization of beverage, dairy, supplement, and food products. With over 15 years in the industry and a wide range of experience, Edible Chemistry will help provide expertise and tools needed to develop and produce success designed through science. Jaime and I are connected through the research chef Andrew Schutz from Edlon, industry-recognized source for dairy flavors and technical ingredients. We're talking about hydrocolloids, ingredients whose names might sound a bit unusual to our ears, but whose functions help us to improve the appearance and texture experience of countless foods, from salad dressings to plant-based non-dairy beverages to gluten-free bread, and so many foods in between. Jaime breaks down what hydrocolloids do, shares a story about a production run that didn't go so great, and gives some ideas of how to work with your customers and educate your consumers when they push back against gums and functional ingredients. So tell us about the expertise that you spent 17 years developing before going into consulting. You've mentioned, we've talked about your expertise in hydrocolloids, so I'm leading in that direction. But tell us about other expertise that you have.
So I have been working in specialty ingredients for my entire career. So everything from flavors to starches to hydrocolloids, a lot of things in the functional space, as far as creating structure to products. So I've worked with a lot of fats, different types of sugars, those types of things. So through working in specialty ingredients, I've had kind of the sheer pleasure of getting to develop expertise in all types of applications. So instead of just focusing on, you have people that are beverage experts, and you have people that are confectionery scientists, and you have people that focus on bakery sciences. I've touched everything in my career. So that's been kind of cool from my perspective, is I've got expertise in formulating beverages, whether they be cold fill, tunnel pasteurized, or aseptically packed into Tetra Pak. I've done a lot of work on dressings and sauces. I've done a lot of work in confectionery sciences. So it's been a real pleasure for me to be in the specialty ingredients. My last couple of postings in the corporate world before I made the jump were specifically focused on hydrocolloids. So I've spent about 10 years just focused on hydrocolloids in my career. So for those that may not understand exactly what those are, the simplest definition is they structure water. So we're talking about things like pectin and xanthan gum, carrageenan, cellulose gum, cellulose gel, those types of things.
Yeah, definitely having experience in functional ingredients would expose you to virtually every segment. I'm trying to think of one that wouldn't have benefited from some sort of functional ingredient. I guess it might depend slightly on the definitions and there. Hydrocolloids, though, are such an interesting one. There are several very big brands that almost come front of mind when you think of that category of functional ingredients. And I really liked that you described it as ingredients that control water, I think is how you said that. could you tell us a little bit more about kind of the general functions of hydrocolloids and um, where their presence are helpful?
Sure. So you can, just to keep it real simple, you can basically separate hydrocolloids into two categories. You can either gel water or you can make it thick. So you have viscosifiers and gelling agents, is kind of the simplest way to put it. So your gelling agents are going to be things like pectin that create jam, gelatin that creates gummy bears, all the way to things like gel and gum, where you're actually suspending particulates in a beverage, or a lot of nut milk shoes, things like gel and gum and carrageenan at very low levels that don't look like a solid mass of gel, but you're actually creating a very kind of loose gel network in order to keep things suspended. So you think of almond milk, all those little almond pieces aren't water soluble. If you didn't have a gelling agent in there to kind of hold them in place in the liquid, they would all fall to the bottom and you'd get nasty sludge. You would not get tasty almond milk. So that's kind of what gelling agents do. And viscosifiers just simply make things thick, give you nice body. They can help with cling and some other things. So the best example of that is probably xanthan gum. And if you've ever bought off the shelf salad dressing from your grocery store, more than likely there is xanthan gum in there. And that is in there to hold the matrix together, but also to make the dressing nice and thick and creamy and have it stick to your lettuce a little bit.
Yeah, having salad dressing stick to lettuce is handy, and
Yes.
not having all my almonds fall out of my almond milk is also good.
Exactly.
Yeah, so your conversations must be very interesting because when you described the functions of the two categories of hydrocolloids, you talked a lot about both the benefits but also the failure modes if those ingredients are not used or not used in high enough levels. Is that more or less the focus, is looking at what it's preventing or what it's doing for a food product?
Well, hydrocolloids they're problem-solving ingredients. So if you have a formulation and you have a problem, like your almonds falling out of your almond milk, you would kind of diagnose that and look at what types of ingredients are going to help you fix that problem. So in the hydrocolloids realm, we would look at either a carrageenan or a gel and gum. So we have to talk about solving the problem, but then on the back end of it, from an operational side, you have to be able to produce the product in a manner that is conducive to allowing the hydrocolloids to hydrate and gel properly. So you can use, say, a carrageenan in your almond milk to suspend your little almond bits. But if you don't hydrate that properly through operations, even though it's in there, it's not going to work and you're still going to have sludge. So there's kind of a lot of pieces to the puzzle there to get that to work properly.
That's definitely where I would recommend engaging an expert, because to your point, using the wrong hydrocolloid or any other functional ingredient will result in a very different result. And as I've understood it, because I had the opportunity to work in aseptic beverage for a little while, as I've understood, some manufacturers are less comfortable using certain ingredients over others because of their equipment. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, that's correct. It can come down as something as meaningly silly as if you have the wrong type of filler head for your beverage. So beverages is one definitely where you've got to be very careful about what type of hydrocolloid you're using based on the equipment you have. So if we talk about aseptic beverages, and we can go back to using, our almond milk examples, aseptically, a lot of those things are packaged into a combi block type of aseptic box package. And if you don't have the right filler head, you might actually gel the product if you don't get enough shear as it's filling into the combi block package. So there's a lot of little pieces that go on to that. And I actually had that happen in my career, where I had a co-manufacturer of a beverage product had the wrong filler head. Everything else was fine, but he had kind of an old school system, and he was filling the product. He was making it properly, using the right use level, heating it to the right temperature, but he just didn't have enough shear in his filler head. So the product was gelling instead of it being nice and liquid.
Talk to us about that challenge. It sounds very unique, and I think there's some lessons in problem solving that we can draw from here. So, would you be able to describe the how you solved for the issue and discovered that it was the filler head?
So, you and I were talking earlier, I think before you started recording, about, how, um, behind the scenes, manufacturing wise, aseptic beverages are kind of aseptic beverages. Everybody's going to have a similar setup. They might have slightly different equipment, but um, everybody's kind of making stuff pretty much the same way with a few exceptions. So just from being in lots and lots of production facilities, and I won't say that I walked in there and we diagnosed it right away, because that did not happen. It took us a little while to figure it out. But kind of going back through my memory of all the manufacturing facilities I had been in, I had remembered um, guys that were very, very successful with creating these types of aseptic beverages using a particular type of filler. So I was able to just kind of pull that from my knowledge. So after we had looked through, the recipe, is the recipe okay? Are they mixing it enough? Is the, um, you know, is their temperature gauge on their aseptic processing machine correct? Is it actually heating it up to 240F to get everything hydrated? So after we kind of looked through all that and we weren't seeing any issues, with the formula, with their batch process, with their aseptic treatment, kind of the only thing that was left was the filler head. So finally took that apart and looked at it and realized it was really old school, and did some shear flow studies through it and determined it just wasn't enough shear to break up the gel on the back end so you could have a nice fluid product. So it took us about 2 days to diagnose it, going through everything, but we were finally able to fix it. And unfortunately, they weren't happy because it's capital expenditure at that time to get new fillers in, but we did fix the problem.
Oh, wow. Okay, so um, it makes sense to go methodically through the recipe first, through the procedures, confirming and validating that each of the process steps were being followed correctly. All of that really methodical exploration of different possible locations or causes of failure mode um, that methodical style, I think, is probably the way that you got to a solution in just 2 days versus letting it go for a much longer time or calling it a fail and the product just isn't going to work at this plant. Um, can I ask, was this during a pilot run or was it during kind of the first production type of setting?
It was actually like their third commercial run in. They hadn't realized the product was gelling until they started getting customer complaints.
Ooh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, okay. That adds another level of the heartbreak and challenge of the work that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it always is working with the plants. It's interesting, and especially being in hydrocolloids and working for hydrocolloids companies on the technical service side is again where I spent a lot of my career. Is it's always the ingredients' fault. It's never the equipment's fault. It's always the ingredients' fault. So kind of getting people to step out of their box and really understand that these things are extremely technical ingredients. I mean, hydrocolloids, and I would say the same thing for starches as well, are extremely technical ingredients. They operate optimally in one kind of set of conditions, and you have to be able to meet that set of conditions or you're not going to be successful.
That's a really great point. As a former product developer myself, really understanding the spec sheet of the ingredient being requested, make sure that the salesperson you requested it from understood your expected use of that material. Leveraging the technical expertise of the supplier is probably the only superpower suggestion I can offer for this is um, I was never the expert at a lot of things, but especially at these technical functional ingredients, and being able to have that relationship with a person like in your shoes who understood the application rate, the challenges of those particular ingredients, and then the kind of the correct way to use them and apply them in a formula. if honestly, if we didn't have people like you with expertise, our food product technology wouldn't nearly be as far as it is.
Yeah, it does go hand in hand. You can have really cool ingredients that do things, but you're right. If you don't know how to use them, you're missing out on some opportunities to do some really, really cool things.
Food Edge is New England's leading food innovation conference, bringing together nearly 400 brands, investors, and entrepreneurs to connect and find their edge. The event will take place virtually on May 4th and 6th and focuses on highlighting industry trends, exploring strategies to drive innovation, and discovering the breakthrough technologies to help food companies stay ahead of the curve. With May 4th, day 1, dedicated to food science and innovation, and May 6th, day 2, focused on sales and marketing, attendees will be able to stay updated on emerging opportunities in plant-based, learn how to capitalize on the alternative protein wave, gain insights on sustainable business practices, explore consumer trends and new product attributes, efficiently navigate the new retail landscape, set strategies for brand growth in an omnichannel world, glean investor insights to support funding journeys, and network with thought leaders in the food innovation space. This year, we're thrilled to welcome industry-leading representatives from Beyond Meat, Kind Snacks, Eat Just, the Good Food Institute, Notco, Indigo Agriculture, Whipstitch Capital, Mondelez International, Sweet Lawrence, Human Co., Vital Farms, Branch Venture Group, CA Fortune, and more. Food Edge 2021 is one of the best opportunities to connect and learn from food industry leaders this year, and we're thrilled to be supported by our wonderful sponsors, Branch Venture Group, CA Fortune, Fresh Communications, Incredible Foods, CalSec, Motif Foodworks, Modus Experiential, Nutter Law, and Propeller Industries. For more information or to register for the summit, visit www.foodedge.co. Look forward to seeing you at the event.
I have a question for you then with regard to the evolution of our kind of use of functional ingredients. A lot of restrictions have started to crop up in recent years about clean label and allowed or disallowed ingredients. And hydrocolloids and other functional ingredients often get picked on. Would you help us understand some of the major clean label challenges and maybe clarify some myths that we might have?
Absolutely. So I would say the biggest hurdle to something like hydrocolloids is the fact that, I mean, just the name of the ingredient category, hydrocolloids, is a little daunting. Consumers don't know what that is. And 9 times out of 10, they don't know what that item is on the label. They don't know what xanthan gum is. They don't know what gellan gum is. Really, the only thing we don't have issues with in the hydrocolloids world is pectin, because people know it makes jam and jelly. You buy pectin in the store. So that's really the only issue that we don't have, kind of a lack of consumer awareness. And all of that really is just a lack of consumer awareness. All of these products are plant-based, except for gelatin, of course. But all of these hydrocolloids, with the exception of gelatin, are plant-based. They're all basically just carbohydrate and fiber sources. I mean, there's nothing really scary or mythical about them. It's, like Metamucil, except it does cool stuff with water, kind of thing. It's all kind of in the same category. So I think there's a lot of consumer wariness around this product category just because they don't know what it is. I mean, there's nothing unsafe about these things. There's nothing mythical about them. They're not like, zombies being created in a lab somewhere. They're not gonna hurt you. But they're all just natural parts of plants. They're the parts of plants that help hold the cell walls together, or hold the rind on your orange, or make things a little sticky. So it's So I think that's just the biggest hurdle is educating the consumer on what these products are and letting them know they're really not that scary.
And in that, though, I mean, I'm going to push back a little bit because as a product developer, I most recently worked for a food startup that carried its own very unique clean label requirements. Um, And I do agree that there is an opportunity for suppliers to offer better education to the CPGs, who I would argue are the front line of educating our consumers.
Hmm.
But when we're talking about innovation pipelines and I'm talking about restriction lists, that's not the easiest place to seek to educate. Um, so how would you address some of those concerns? Say if a client is, um, disallows xanthan gum because it sounds crazy or something. I don't like X's. I don't know. How would you work through that educational piece, knowing that the customer ultimately wants to produce a product with certain functionality? The xanthan gum would be our first ingredient to use, and they want to get to the market. They don't want to be educators. They don't want to be educated necessarily.
Yeah. So I think, I get that question a lot of, I want to make this, but I don't, and xanthan gum is a great example because literally people don't like it or maltodextrin simply because there's X's in them. And Americans don't like X's for whatever reason. So that's actually a good one to call out because you literally have people say, this is on my no-no list because there's an X in it.
It may have been an example born from real life experience.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt it because I've gotten that one many times. So, typically what I do is when people give me their, let's just call it their no-no list for a lack of anything better to call it. But people give me their no-no list of ingredients. This is what I don't want in my product. So what we kind of look at is, okay, what are we trying to create? What are the best tools in our toolbox to create that product and have it be successful as far as have it look good, taste good, but also how successful from a manufacturing perspective. Can we manufacture this? Is it going to be stable in its carton at the end of this? So we kind of look at all that and we say, okay, so here's the best toolbox. And you're telling me that we have to take, you want me to hammer nails into wood without a hammer. So what is the next best thing to use for a hammer? So, what I like to do is kind of talk them through it. And I have about a 50%, success rate of talking people out of some of the things on their no-no list once they really understand what it is and what the functionality is. So being able to talk through that, and really just get them to understand what it is, understand that it's providing a very important function in the product. The product's not going to be as successful without it. I have about half of my consumers will say, okay, that makes sense. Nobody's ever explained that to me before. I understand what it is now. It's not so scary and I know that I need it. But then you still have 50% that say, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but my consumers don't want it. So we have to find a way around it. So then instead of getting the hammer to hammer our nails in, maybe we're looking at flipping a wrench upside down and trying to hammer a nail into wood with the backside of a wrench. So then, there's other tools that we can look at that will help make our product more stable or help with that functionality. They're just not going to do it as well. If we take a look at xanthan gum, say if somebody doesn't want xanthan gum in a salad dressing, the next best thing you can put in there is a modified food starch that's developed for that type of product. Okay, well, I don't want modified food starch on the label. Okay, well, then I guess we're kind of stuck with guar gum at that point. And if you don't like guar gum, you're just going to have runny dressing because that's it, we're out of options. And you do have people that will take the I want no stabilizer option. And those are always interesting conversations because you're going to get a substandard product. You're going to have, a very quote unquote clean label, depending on your definition of clean label, but it's might not look good. It might not taste good. And you might have sludge.
And I think that's a good, explanation to work through with the customer is, okay, well, if you don't want to use this and you want us to use the upside down wrench, firstly, you're going to probably dent your wrench because I don't think it's designed for that. You might stub a thumb or something, because it's not designed to hammer that way. Illustrating the outcomes and making sure that they understand not the failure mode in this case, but the omitted mode of what that would look like. And I do think some customers are willing to take a quote unquote inferior looking product because of their restrictions. And then we get customer complaints. And it's like, okay.
Yep.
How do
Yeah.
when a customer calls you and says, I know you told me that, ideally xanthan gum is the best. We chose not to use it. Now I'm getting complaints about XYZ potential issues that you've identified to them. Now what do I do? How do you talk them through that?
Well, it goes back to the consumer education piece. I mean, like you said, you have people that just don't want to educate the consumer. They want to put a product out there. But if you put a product out there that looks different, we can just use our almond milk example again. We have an almond milk and it's all sludge on the bottom because you don't want any stabilizers in there. And you get calls and complain to consumers. I mean, that's consumer education you're going to have to do on your end. You're going to have to talk to those consumers to say, hey, we understand this doesn't look like other things on the market. We understand that you feel like this is an inferior product, but our brand model is we're not putting stabilizers or added ingredients into anything. And that's why it looks like this. So at that point, it's the consumer's choice whether or not that they like no stabilizers or they want a product that looks nice.
Or I guess every package you sell will have to have shake well before use.
Yeah. You can do that. But what happens when stuff, especially the shelf stable products, when they've been on the shelf for a while, there's no shaking that stuff back in.
That is a good point.
Yeah. So I mean, you run the risk. There's a couple of brands out there, and I'm the nut milk side that do not have stabilizers in their products, and they get a lot of complaints, but they're not willing to budge. So obviously they're selling enough and they have a big enough consumer market that they're okay with putting these products out where it's all sludge on the bottom. But, that's their brand model and that's their choice. And, I think that they've hopefully done some really good research on their consumers and they can keep the brand going with the small consumer pocket they're going to have.
Thank you so much for downloading this podcast today. It was a little bigger of a quick bite, but the information was so important, I just couldn't find a way to shorten it. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. Please let me know what you think of these quick bite style episodes, and if you'd like to share your expertise, please reach out. This podcast is a free service created and maintained as a side hustle, and I am supported by a few generous Patreon sponsors who helped me offset the costs for publication. If you've got some extra marketing budget and would like to help Peas on Moss stick around, please let me know. Visit peasonmoss.com and get details.